Shad Gaspard had a tragic death in May 2020, drowning in the ocean after saving his son. The people who knew him are unanimous. The former member of the popular Cryme Tyme stable was an extraordinary human being. It is a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to celebrate this special person through the most incredible stories about him. Are you ready to be shocked to learn how he prevented a robbery in December 2016? Are you wondering which famous video game character he did the motion capture of? Do you want to know more about the huge things the WWE was planning for him at the end of 2009? Do you want to find out what specific event in his romantic life gave him his determination to succeed? And are you curious to learn about the incident that caused the dismissal of the Cryme Tyme team in the fall of 2007? You are at the right place, because in our video we are going to tell you the most incredible revelations about Shad Gaspard, and they may surprise you. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the craziest stories about Shad Gaspard. Let's go. On May 17th, 2020, Shad was with his son at the Marina del Rey beach, a place where they like to go together, and the one who was part of Cryme Tyme played ball with him. They also dug in the sand with a shovel to practice, some precious time between father and son. But that day, when they went to swim in the Pacific Ocean, there was a strong wave and suddenly their lives were in danger. So when rescues arrived on the scene, Shad Gaspard asked that his son be saved as a priority, which they were able to do. But when they came back, Shad had disappeared. The police searched for his body for 2 days before suspending the search, and that the corpse ended up being found on the same beach. In this search, Shad's wife and son had been joined by wrestlers John Morrison, Chris Masters and JGG, Shad's friend in Cryme Tyme. Initially, the latter had a call from Celiana, Shad's wife, who was like his big brother. When she explained the situation to him, he initially thought it was a prank, since that's what he and Shad often did, even though he immediately noticed that she had a different tone than usual. But when he arrived on the spot and saw that the people had flashlights, he realized it was very real. At that moment, after spending hours searching in vain, JTG says he had no choice but to accept what had happened, even if, basically during all this research, he only had one hope: that Shad would surprise him behind his back and take him in his arms. Unfortunately, that will not happen, and his colleague died while being swept away by the waves after sacrificing himself to save his son. When Shad Gaspard was fired a second time from the Stamford Federation in 2010, it was in a completely different field than wrestling that he was going to work. Indeed, he was going to retrain in cinema and try to become an actor in Hollywood, just like The Rock. About Rocky, by the way. It should be noted that Gaspard was supposed to play the character of Roadblock in the movie G.I. Joe Retaliation, released in 2013, but that he finally didn't get the role from the moment The Rock read the script, and that he wanted to play Roadblock himself. However, this will not prevent the two men from being friends in real life, and Shad will still have a small role in the movie. In any case, Gaspard was determined to become an actor, and as his relatives say, he has always been someone who gets what he wants, and it will show, since he will be in multiple projects, among which we could note his participation in the shows The Game, Lucifer and Law & Order, secondary roles in the movies Birds of Prey, Black Panther, Get Hard with Kevin Hart and Will Ferrell, and perhaps his most incredible project. He made the motion capture, lending his body and his movements to the main character of Kratos in the video game God of War, which has sold more than 20 million copies worldwide. A real achievement for Shad, although most players don't know it. In parallel with this acting career, he also designed his own comic book entitled Assassin's Son, a project in which he was helped by another former wrestler, Muhammad Hassan, a friend of his. At the beginning it was a movie script, but Shad had the idea of making it a comic book, and there are talks to adapt it to cinema. It tells the story of Donovan Braddock, a killer character who works with a group of assassins called the Horsemen and whose wife is going to be killed in front of his eyes, which will push him to take revenge with his son, a story behind which we guess the importance that Shad attached to his role as a father and how important his son was in his life. Do you want other stories about Gaspard, and in particular, how he prevented a robbery? Don't worry, it's coming by the end of the video, hang in there. During the summer of 2007, Cryme Tyme had a rivalry with those who were the tag team champions at that time. the Cowboys Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. On August 27th, for example, on Raw, the rappers had stolen Cade's hat to give it to a fan. But behind the scenes, the two teams didn't get along very well either, although they had the opportunity to fight many times in the ring, and that Cade and Murdoch had nothing against Cryme Tyme. As human beings, Lance thought it didn't work with the Brooklyn wrestlers, and that this is the most difficult period they had with Trevor Murdoch by far. He also couldn't understand them. While they were supposed to embody thugs who come from the street, Cryme Tyme were funny characters. When Lance was angry with them, he would blame them for being the most fake guys in the locker room, and that if he had to go to a ghetto, he would rather have Trevor Murdoch with him than those goons. According to him, Gaspard and JTG were not involved enough, and did not like wrestling as much as Trevor and him, which is obviously just his point of view. In the end, on September 1st, 2007, the two teams faced each other in a non-televised match, and for several weeks the relationship between the two camps had already been tense. But that day, Gaspard told Murdoch that what will happen in the ring will happen, which the latter saw as a threat, and in reaction to this, with Lance, they decided to do a joke on their rivals. With the referee, they secretly agreed on a finish that Cryme Tyme was unaware of. At the moment when JTGB inside the ring, the referee was going to deliberately count to 10 much faster than usual, so that he could not get back in the ring in time, and was therefore counted out, which would cost his team the defeat. Except that when it happened, and that Cade and Murdoch fled, Shad Gaspard felt treated like a nobody, and was quick to react with his friend. They did their finisher on the referee, who was also not a trained wrestler. Then they stole his belt to auction it in the crowd, which was their gimmick. As we can imagine, this is an incident that has not been appreciated at all by the company, which will lead to their dismissal. And although he thought Lance was a very nice person and a good father, Shad Gaspard said about him that purely in wrestling, he was a piece of trash who was trying to be a bully. It was really time for their rivalry to end. When we look at the youth of Shad Gaspard, one can only be impressed by his legitimacy as a true badass and notice that he was a force of nature. He was born on January 13th, 1981, in Brooklyn in the state of New York, and he is the son of Ben Gaspard, who was the henchman of several gangs in the early 70s, and also a personal security agent. He was also a close friend of Frank Lucas, the drug lord who inspired the character of Denzel Washington in the movie American Gangster once. His father was also a fighter who fought to earn money on the streets of Haiti, where Chad's family comes from, before even becoming a professional boxer at the age of 18. In this family, where Chad had 5 brothers and sisters, they were more than familiar with fighting, since his mother also did kickboxing and was even trained in Muay Thai. So we will not be surprised to learn that at the age of only 5, Shad Gaspard began to be trained in boxing, and then later at the age of 8 in martial arts by his father. It's something he loved, and quite young, he will do amateur fights, multiplying victories with an aggressive style that earned him a new nickname given by his mother, Beast. At the age of 6, Chad was already fighting for money for the promoter Hardbody Harrison, a bodybuilder who once wrestled at World Championship Wrestling. Despite his young age, Chad faced adults who were up to 20 years older than him, and he had a record of 35 wins for 7 losses, and in boxing 57 wins for 26 defeats. Long before entering the wrestling ring, Gaspard had therefore been involved in no less than 125 official fights, of which he won almost 3/4, equivocal data that clearly illustrate the warrior he was in real life. And all this was very useful to him in December 2016. One day at that time, he was at a gas station in Florida, and he came across a drunk individual who was going to ask him to buy him a beer, which Chad refuses to do. And then this man is going to pull out a gun, about to rob the gas station. But in a heroic initiative, Chad overpowered the guy by putting him on the ground and taking his gun from him, and then immobilized him until the police arrived on the scene. He had the courage to intervene in front of this man, and his heroism may have prevented deaths or injuries. When Cryme Tyme broke up on the screen, Shad Gaspard was a heel character for a few weeks in the spring of 2010. Personally, I think that Chad had the physique, the intensity and the legitimacy to be in the big leagues. to go and challenge the best wrestlers in the federation. And that's probably what the officials also thought. Chad revealed that he was told at the end of 2009 that Cryme Tyme was going to end, and that he would be pushed for a new singles role, and not just any one. After WrestleMania 26, once the team was disbanded, he was supposed to be on Monday Night Raw and become the next opponent of the champ, John Cena. Apparently, there were even talks of him winning the belt, which would have been historic, since it had never been won by an African American before, apart from The Rock, but he is half Samoan. So for some time, Shad Gaspard therefore was the lucky one to mark history, 9 years before Kofi Kingston will eventually make it at WrestleMania 35. And personally, I think a storyline with John Cena could have been very interesting, given their shared history in 2008 when they were Cryme Tyme Cenation, especially since Mr. Hustle Loyalty Respect never had a rival with a street side. But apparently Chad said that there were some agents and some people involved behind the scenes whose identity he did not want to reveal, considered that he did not deserve this spotlight, that he did not know how to wrestle. Then, the plans changed and he finally ended up on SmackDown. However, starting in January 2010, Shad had trained more than ever by doing MMA and Muay Thai. He says he was trying to prepare himself as best he could to be champion. In his eyes, what cost him this major push was first of all the politics behind the scenes of the federation. He apparently had detractors among the officials of the company who opposed his push and who, according to him, were racist. Something that Chad never complained about because he always knew that there was racism in this industry for many years. According to him, it has already happened that people from the creative team believe they know how he was supposed to speak or what he was supposed to like as a black person. Or that an official asks him how he ended up in Thailand when Chad told him he had learned a certain move in this country. This person didn't even conceive that a black person had taken a plane to travel. Before forming a team in the ring, Chad and JTG were already friends in real life since their colleague Elijah Burke had introduced them to each other during an amateur show. The crazy thing is, they met when they were at Ohio Valley Wrestling in Louisville, Kentucky. But that in reality, they both grew up more than 600 miles away in Brooklyn, where they lived just a few minutes from each other without knowing it. For the record, one day JTG, who was 19 years old at the time when he met the one he will consider his big brother, needed money and to have a job. So Shad Gaspard went to a movie rental store where he went to the manager, telling him that his little brother needed a job. 2 weeks later, JTG was hired there. Another time, Chad was going to move out and left his place to JTG, his first apartment in his life, as if he had inherited what was his big brother's just before and taken over in a way. And in an amateur show once, when they were going to have their first match together, JTG didn't want to be shirtless just before making their entrances, because he had a burn on his back since he was little, because of a babysitter who wanted to give him a bath that was too hot when he was a baby. It's something he was insecure about and he really didn't want to take off his t-shirt. But Chad told him at the time of their entrance that he wasn't going to the ring until he was shirtless, and that otherwise JTG would go by himself. Chad put his back against the wall, and for his brother, JTG got over his insecurity, and in the end, no one ever noticed his burn. Thanks to his big brother, he was freed from this burden. A beautiful relationship between the two men. In Shad Gaspard's life, there was a very specific event that changed everything. At the age of 19, he was in love with a girl with whom he had even taken an apartment, but he had the misfortune to discover that she had cheated on him, which broke his heart. At that moment, he will spend several days depressed, but his mother told him to stop crying, to move on and show the whole world who he was. We can say that this ordeal put a real slap in the face of Shad Gaspard, since, in the aftermath, he spent a whole year in an apartment without hot water, with only a mattress, a television, a telephone, and especially bodybuilding equipment that he bought. For a year, he devoted his life to training. Every day he worked out after going for a run in the morning, with the aim of becoming even more of a beast and fulfilling his dream of succeeding in pro wrestling. And what is absolutely incredible is that at this period of his life, he worked as a security guard in nightclubs, and above all, He was the personal security guard of several celebrities including singer Britney Spears, rapper Puff Daddy, and even boxer Mike Tyson, and shortly after, Shad Gaspard signed in the Stanford Federation. And that was it for the craziest stories about Shad Gaspard. We were able to see that he had an inspiring journey from a youth in Brooklyn in the worlds of fighting and street life to his tragic end where he died as a hero through an impact in wrestling in Cryme Tyme. The people who worked with him remember him with emotion, and all the testimonies about him show the beautiful person he was. And I come to offer you a debate. Was Cryme Tyme, in your opinion, the most entertaining team of all time? Come and give your opinion. It will be great to exchange our points of view in the comments. We can say that Shad was really special. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?